This is a possible solution for the extra credit problem that we got last week, trying to make a button on screen that if you click, the action of the button remains on screen or continues to happen whether or not you are still holding down the mouse. So previously we've only been able to have the action continue or remain on screen if the mouse continues to be held. So that's what I'm going to set up first. So we have our button right now. I'm going to set up if mouse pressed. And I can write equals equals true, but remember, if I just put mouse pressed without equals equals true, that's a shortcut for equals equals true. Just assume that's what I mean for this particular Boolean variable. I'm going to check to see if, open in a curly bracket, then my next nested conditional statement will be if mouse x is greater than, the left edge of the button is 200 pixels over on the x-axis, and it's 100 pixels wide, so if it starts at 200 and it's 100 pixels wide, the right side must be at 300, so I'm going to say if mouse x is less than 300, close that parentheses, open another curly bracket, then if mouse y is greater than the top of the button, which is at 225, and mouse y is less than 225, the top of the button, plus it's 50 pixels high, is 275 for the bottom of the button. And I'm going to close 1, 2, 3 curly brackets. And let's just, for right now, change the background to black. So if I press this button, the screen will turn black, but only as long as I'm holding down the button. So what can I do to make it so that the black screen will remain even when I release the button? So one possible way that you could do that, knowing what we've covered already, is to set up another variable, and I'm going to call it int clicked, and I'm going to set it equal to 0 as a starting value. Again, that's just a shortcut. It's the same thing as saying int clicked and then saying clicked equals 0 in setup, but just as a shortcut, we can declare and initialize in one line. So instead of having the conditional statement have the action inside the conditional statements that checks to see if you are inside the button area and clicking, what we can do in here is we can change this variable clicked to a different value. So I could say, if this happens, clicked equals 1. So now, if I rerun this program, we're not going to see anything except for the fact that when I click here, the value of this global integer variable goes from 0 to 1. Now, then that gives me the opportunity to set up another conditional statement that, this is super important, is completely outside of this conditional statement. It cannot be nested inside here. It has to be outside. So we'll annotate this by saying change value to 1. Then if clicked equals 1, then background equal is black. Close that conditional statement. So because once I click the button, click becomes 1, it's not reset anywhere else. It stays at 1. The value of click will be 1 forever after I click the button because there's no other place to change this back to 0. So, and you can't see, but I'm no longer pressing the button and the screen remains black. So it's a separate variable, and here we use an integer variable with a separate conditional statement. So the button press changes the value of that variable, and then if that variable's value gets changed, change the background to black. I think a couple people for the extra credit said, clicked equals clicked plus 1. And the only difference here is because, as you might remember, since this happens, it's checking these conditions 60 times a second. It's really hard to click a button so it only would add one time. It would probably add a couple times. This would be called a couple times with each click because of the way I draw loops through. So instead of equals 1 here, I'd probably want to say greater than equal to 1. So if by the time I finish clicking the button, the value of clicked had been increased a couple of times. So that would also work just fine. For right now, though, I'm going to change it back to just clicked equals 1, and if clicked equals 1 here. here, because the next thing we're going to do in the next video is talk about a different kind, well, no, we've talked about Boolean variables. Mouse press, for example, is a Boolean variable. We're going to talk about making our own Boolean variables to do this just a little bit more elegantly.